Hi, Eric.
Hello.
You're lucky. It looks like we're waiting for Darcy, but, oh, I'm gonna get rid of this. Hold on just a second. There we go. Sorry, I'm gonna 2 seconds here. Give me 1 minute. Okay. Where are you calling in from, Eric?
East Bend.
Oh, okay, so not too far. Not too
Yeah, not
far.
too far.
Welcome.
Thank
Well,
you.
I guess we'll just go ahead. Darcy should pop in here fairly quickly, I'm hoping. So we'll just get going. So we'll keep this pretty informal, I think, since it's just you and Emma and I, Eric. My name is Lori Claire. I'm the Admissions and Recruitment Office for the Faculty of Law. And Emma Edmonds is here with me. She is the Senior Admissions Assistant and will be moderating, well, if we have more than you, moderating questions in the chat. Oh, there's Darcy. Hi, Darcy. This looks like it's fairly casual. We only have one student so far, but we're, so I thought we'll just go ahead. He's going to get the,
Get the flow. That's awesome.
So I was just saying that this webinar is on the JD Indigenous category. I had just quickly introduced myself and Emma, and this is Dr. Darcy Lindberg, who is a professor at the Faculty of Law. So I'm really super excited, but before I jump in, I just want to make an acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge and respect the Lekwungen peoples on whose traditional territory the University of Victoria stands, and the Songhees, the Esquimalt, and Hispanic peoples whose historical relationship with this land continues to this day. I always think for me personally, it's really important because it reminds me to be grateful to the First Nations people for this land where I've had the privilege to raise my family, to work, and to play. I try never to take it for granted. It's just such an incredible honor and privilege. So having said that, I'm going to pop it over to Emma quickly if she wants to do an introduction to herself.
Yeah. So as Lori said, I'm the Senior Admissions Assistant, and I'm coming to you from Cowichan Territory. I'm near Duncan on Vancouver Island, and yeah, grateful to be here. And I mean, it's just us right now, but if more people come in, feel free to pop questions in the chat. But for now, I think we'll just have a bit of a conversation.
Mm-hmm. And Darcy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello everybody. It's great to see everybody here and a small and intimate crowd, so it'll be a great conversation. Darcy Lindberg, I am a professor at UVic in the Faculty of Law, so I teach also in the JID program as well. I was a law student at UVic, and I did my graduate studies there as well, and so I've kind of every level at UVic. I was also staff for a little bit as well, and so I've hit every rung, so I know a lot about the place. So Eric, ask any questions you want. My family, I'm Samson Cree on my mom's side as we go back in the Battleford area as well. On my dad's side is Papas Chase Cree in Swedish Canadian as well. What else can I tell you? I teach in the areas of constitutional law, Aboriginal law, so Aboriginal rights and governance, Indigenous legal orders, focus on Cree law specifically, and I've done a little bit of work on environmental law as well. Yeah.
Awesome. So I often do a lot of the talking, and I thought maybe we'd switch it up this time, and maybe I'd start with you, Darcy, if that's okay. Before we go into, I was thinking maybe what we could do is I'd like to hear a little bit about your journey to law school and why it's important for you, or was important for you, or continues to be important. And maybe we could just have a little bit of a conversation and then transition into talking about the JD Indigenous Indigenous category and what that looks like.
Yeah.
Does that sound okay?
Yeah, that sounds great, Lori. Yeah, so before I wasn't one of these people who thought I'd be a lawyer. You know, like some people are grade 2, they're filling out things saying, I want to be a lawyer, that sort of thing. I never really thought about law school until later in my life. And what I did is after I finished my undergrad, so I did my undergrad in Alberta at a Augustana University College, which is now part of the U of A. And during my summers there, I worked on a program that was working with Alberta First Nations and Métis settlements. And when I finished my undergrad, I was lucky enough to coordinate that program. So I spent a lot of time out in Indigenous communities, essentially, for my professional life for 5 years. And so in doing that, I just saw the need for representation in a number of different areas by those communities. And so that's when I first started thinking about it and really thinking about back, I used to think about it as community development. I don't necessarily use that language anymore, but the idea of how can First Nation Métis settlements at the time where I was working, how can they be strengthened by not only representation, but opportunities for growth, redress for past harms, all that stuff I was really interested in as I got to learn quite a variety of Indigenous nations in Alberta, their histories. And so I started to think about it. So the second part of this is I just fortuitously ran into Val Napoleon. So Dr. Val Napoleon, who is at the University of Victoria, who's now the acting dean at this moment. I was in Cold Lake First Nations and she had gone to a sweat lodge ceremony that I'd gone to as well. And so we just kind of met each other there and we talked a little bit about it and got guidance for her. So it was important that seed of representation of Indigenous peoples and nations is where it started from. I didn't know exactly what that entailed. So law school was kind of a choice to take a step in a direction that would figure it out. You know, I didn't have this plan of being, you know, a corporate commercial lawyer or a criminal lawyer or anything like that. I just wanted to go and figure out how the law worked or the laws worked. And so I did that. And how I've seen it work out is really the work that I started to do, not necessarily as practicing. I should have mentioned I practiced for 3 years in the Yukon Territory. And then I went back and did my grad studies. And so a little bit of it worked with, because I was doing work with First Nations in the Yukon. But a lot of the work that I initially envisioned and in terms of helping with law revitalization, different projects and communities has really occurred since my grad studies started and now as a professor. So a lot of community engagement research, been doing things like helping communities with cases and in the, you know, in the court system, all sorts of really wonderful work I've been able to engage in. Took a while to get there as well. So to answer your question there, kind of this journey of understanding what we might need in the work with communities in Alberta, and really spending a lot of time just gaining the skills that a lot of you provided and finding where that journey went. Yeah.
That's awesome. And Eric, I apologize. I should have asked you as well. Do you want to introduce yourself since we're such a small group here? Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Lori. My name is Eric Velastuk. I'm a UVic BCom graduate. I graduated just this last summer, and I'm taking a year to work, get some money, and then my plan is to apply to UVic Law next year, or starting next year. And yeah, and I'm Métis. My mom's side is from Sioux Lookout in Manitoba, and this is like the best school to get more involved with Indigenous works. Also, a lot of environmental stuff that particularly interests me. So, yeah, it seems like a good spot.
Fabulous. So when I go out and I'm recruiting, I often get asked especially from potential Indigenous applicants, what's in it for me? Why law? Why should I pursue? What's in it for me? And then I really want to give back to my community. How can I do that with a legal education? I don't even say career anymore, because a lot of people don't always necessarily come in and practice law per se. They often come in because they want more of an understanding of the law in order to better advocate. So I don't know, Darcy, can you speak to any of those? Why law, and how would it be beneficial to Indigenous students to be able to give back to their communities?
Yeah, so it's a really wonderful question, and I like it. It's a complex one as well, because it is there is this danger that we talk about often, about like a drain from communities when students, any post-secondary education, right, that going out of the community, and that education, people aren't necessarily returning, and that just happens. With law is really particular because it's there's lots of work out there, as I mentioned, just kind of what sprung my interest in law. And so it's, as we know, it may not be particularly somebody's home community that they're working with, because it might be limited job opportunities. They might have law firms they work with as well. But that idea of working with Indigenous communities at large, law is a really wonderful field to be able to do that. To be able to do it actually from afar as well, because a lot of law work does take from afar. So that's the first thing when we think about that sort of go out, work at a law firm. There's lots of great Aboriginal law firms that work with Indigenous nations and are doing that work. And so it's a way to really engage with communities. One of the learnings that I got when I was a law student, I thought I wanted to do these large, Aboriginal rights and title cases and environmental law cases. And my practice in the Yukon was more focused on development, even corporate development. And I saw that as like the sort of building blocks for good living within Indigenous communities and nations. And I found that really valuable. So it was a really great learning for me, because I never thought I would do corporate commercial work, and I never necessarily saw the value of it until I actually was working with nations, because it was really setting up a corporation for a business they had. It was setting up not-for-profits, leases, all sorts of things that when you think of, to borrow the word, the sort of sexy law of Aboriginal rights and title, it's actually these other things that really make a difference in community. So Aboriginal law work really makes a difference. And then, so the second stream of that, I would say, is we're seeing this revitalization of Indigenous laws, and you get UVic, I would say. So I'm a little bit biased, but I went to school there, but I also worked at the University of Alberta, and great colleagues, and they're doing lots of wonderful work on Indigenous laws there as well. And UVic, it really is, it's immersed fully in this. And even within, we have a joint degree program, but the JD program, there's wonderful professors who are assigning this work, getting that learning. And I find that's the second way, is that really that law revitalization work that's going on in Indigenous nations and communities is really at the foremost right now, in terms of that question of giving back or working with, that's just such a strong part of it as well. Yeah.
Fabulous, thank you. And I see we have somebody else who's joined us here this evening. I can't even begin to pronounce your name. I apologize. So I'm wondering if you'd like to unmute and introduce yourself.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm joining from Treaty 9. I'm in Kirkland Lake, Ontario. I'm a member of Moose Cree First Nation, and I just submitted my application to the JID program. I did my LSAT last week. It's been extremely stressful, but I'm just grateful that my Wi-Fi has been working to be able to attend. So me quick. Thanks.
And how do you pronounce your name, may I ask?
Yeah, it's Maev.
Maev?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, unmute. I have a question for both of you, Eric and Niev. And it will circle back to what I'm talking about when I'm talking about your application process. But it helps, I think it'll also help inform this webinar a little bit, perhaps give Darcy and I some ideas on what information you're looking for. So my question to you is this: why law?
Maya, would you like to go first?
You can go. It's like very like complex for me. So I'm just, you can go if you like.
Sure, I'll go first. Well, I think to begin with, I sort of like school, to be honest. So it just seemed like something that I was naturally sort of drawn towards. I think that the content can be really rich. Like, there's business law that could connect to my undergrad, there's Indigenous law, environmental law, like whatever politicians do, just like tons of different areas. And it feels like a position that, kind of lets you do a lot, like you have control in a lot of ways over your own life, but also you can like influence policy decisions, or you can make a difference in a community, like Darcy was saying earlier. And I find that in like a lot of careers, like for instance, for a while I was interested in accounting. There's not the same kind of like you're making a difference feel. So those are kind of the big draws for me. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. For me, I as like a Cree woman, French speaking, I feel like I have an obligation to be like in this profession, like, and to learn and absorb as much as I can. My undergrad is in health sciences, minor in Indigenous studies, and like the fact that I was able to learn about my culture, our history and everything through school, that's what really like opened my eyes to like how much people like us are needed within like at all fronts, right? And to me, it's really just being drawn and feeling like, I was kind of guided down a path to be like in law, essentially. I could go into more detail. It's just, for me, it's like being able to honor my community, my family, my ancestors, the future generations. It's really, that's what it is for me.
Beautiful. Thank you both for sharing. It's I won't go too much into it right now because I will talk a little bit about it later, but it's a really important piece. It's one of the questions I often lead off with because it's an important piece to UVic Law. We are very interested in you and why you're interested in law, because we are very passionate about law. We're really passionate about the changes, the really positive changes that law has the potential to make. So I often really ask that question because it's surprising, because a lot of people often actually haven't even thought about why. They've just thought, it sounds really cool, law is really amazing. And we're really looking, we want you to dig it a little bit deeper. So Eric, you have mentioned an intersectionality between environmental, Indigenous, business, areas. Again, I would probably say if you're thinking of applying and doing your personal statement, I'd want you to dig that a little bit deeper for me. Dig it. Why is that important? Why is that important to you? Darcy, I don't know whether you have anything that you want to add into that.
Yeah, so can you just repeat the question there, Laurie?
Yeah, so why why law for you? Why was it important for you?
Okay.
Let's say.
Yeah, I was like, am I answering for Eric and yeah? Okay.
Sorry, no, I didn't.
Why was it important for you? Yeah, no, I'm just joking. Yeah, so it was important, like law versus other things. I mean, law was one. For me, it was because I was actually working for a government agency and seeing how ineffective some things that government were doing, a lot of things maybe, if I can speak frankly. And law was one of these things where it was something that potentially had immediate impact, even though that isn't always the case. The other thing was I just needed to understand the kind of broader system of how things were working. So when you're thinking about, for example, a lot of things that drew me to it was seeing, and for my family, I knew how, you know, um, life on a reserve, but the administration worked as well. I already knew that, but just being critical and seeing a lot of challenges that were really common in Alberta, that was drawing me to like, okay, how do we, for example, think about the Union Act in a different way? And so law was really this tool that kind of was there at that kind of like crux in these conflicts. So that was really important. The other one was just to have the ability to speak in the language of that. So even with like politics and those sorts of things as well. And so in one ways, it was like really this sharpening idea. Um, when I was going through my JD, when I was getting my law degree, I started to, you get to pull that. So I appreciate what you're saying, Eric, when you're like, there's business and there's, Indigenous law and there's environmental law. You start to see how these fields work in a law degree. And that was really important. Law is great for that because it's general at the start and then you get to focus in there.
Your video
Lean
froze
at
there.
us. Oh yeah, sorry. I saw everybody's face was frozen. I thought it was all you, but it was just me. Um, no, man, when you're talking about like that calling, I was sharing before you got on that I met Val Napoleon at a ceremony and it just seemed like this really brief like connection of like, okay, you're meant to go here as well. And so even as I was contemplating a master's in other fields at the time, it was just those sort of connections really led me to think like, this is going to give me this view of the world that I want. It's going to give me these tools. And that's the other thing that I was taught is that law is a tool. It's not something you become. It's going to give me these tools to get along. So, and then that's kind of like the Western way of thinking about it. Another way is like bundling in our communities. Like it's a bundle that you use for medicines as well. And so I was taught both of those. And then the third one is it just felt like a right path that led me to there as well. Yeah. Not to get too complex with the question, but it's
No,
a great, yeah.
that's perfect and a perfect articulation of what we're looking for in that personal statement. That that why that really gets down to the crux. We're not expecting you to identify a particular area of law necessarily and then commit to it, but we really are interested in why law. So for the personal statement, the next piece that I would ask is why UVic Law? We're really lucky in Canada in that any law school you attend, you're going to get an exceptional legal education. So why UVic Law? Why is UVic Law a good fit for you? Darcy, why was it a good fit for you?
Geez, I should have kept my my letter I sent in. I could have. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, so I've told this story a number of times. Is that I got accepted actually to, luckily enough, to the University of Victoria, the University of Alberta, and McGill. And McGill, unlike Mayev, I didn't have a good grasp of French at all at the time, and they were actually. They said we come and could take an intensive for a year on language. So they actually really tried to make a lot of room for that, which was really great. The University of Alberta, I was living essentially on campus in Edmonton there, and I got accepted there as well. And then, but it really, I was excited. But when I got accepted to UVic, I was like over the moon. It just kind of felt right in there. And the reason was for that was not only just like an intuition, but I also knew that the people there. So I knew John Burroughs, for example, Dr. John Burroughs was teaching there. I knew the reputation that UVic Law had in terms of Indigenous issues. And actually Val Napoleon, to her credit, she was working at the University of Alberta at the time. And she heard me talk kind of like what we're doing here. And she said, well, U of A, it's great. Would love to have you here, but it seems like your interests are going to be more towards UVic, because she knew I was thinking about these things like environmental law and also Indigenous nationhood as well. And she knew that the faculty here was making room for that, so to speak. And so those are really those reasons why I applied and was really happy I got in. It was really that kind of focus on you know, critical thinking about the law and Indigenous communities, Indigenous nationhood, environmental laws. And also, quite honestly, I'll say this, is that the other schools, when I was talking to them, so it's probably people in maybe Laurie's position, they would say things like, okay, I'm going to give you the hard sell when after I got accepted, right? And it was strange to me. I was like, what's a hard sell? And UVic was just like, this is what we are. If this is the place for you, then by all means come, right? And that's kind of how I roll. It was like, and so I felt really comfortable and excited going to the school. Yeah.
Nice, thank you. Mahev, is there a reason why UVic's a good fit for you?
I only applied to UVic because like of the Indigenous law program. I've always been just so drawn to it when I've been doing my research over the past year. And all the readings that I'm getting in my courses, they're all from John Burroughs. So that's what really sparked my research. At the National Center for Indigenous Laws, the school literally has like all the well-known Indigenous legal scholars in Canada, the only program in the world. And I'm talking about the JID program, but I'm like looking into applying to the JD program as well. But just, I also have friends in both programs. They love the community. They love the Indigenous Resource Center there as well. And like, as Indigenous peoples, we look to build community wherever we are. And I'm fortunate enough to work and be involved with the community at U Ottawa. And it's really shaped me as a Cree scholar on unceded Algonquin territory. So I'm really looking forward to like, well, hopefully if I get in to like get to know the community there as well, because I just heard so many amazing things.
Wonderful, that's good to know. Eric, how about you? How come UVic?
Program-wise, I think that UVic has probably the strongest environmental law program in Canada. At least, you know, from my research, it would seem. They have like the Environmental Law Center. There's also a ton of like co-op opportunities in the JD program that can connect. But I also think that they do a little bit more of a complete view, because like you said earlier, like kind of like connecting it to other topics. I think that's really important, because like a lot of the environmental issues impact Indigenous communities. And like, although like other schools probably do this to an extent, I don't think they have the same emphasis on what I think is kind of like the direction that can head. I don't know. That's for me. It's also really near Vancouver, where, you know, my family is, right?
Yeah, another important piece. That's all great. So then the third piece to the personal statement, and I know I'm kind of going back and forth here, but I will try to pull it together here for you. The third piece is how is UVic a good fit for you, which you've answered pretty much there, but how are you a good fit for UVic Law? So what are you bringing to the table that is going to add value to the community and the environment that we're trying to build at UVic Law? And I will tell you, one of the biggest, I don't like to say mistakes, but what people often don't realize that they can use to their advantage is their lived experience. So leverage your lived experience. Everybody, I was talking to, I sent Darcy an email earlier saying, you know, I talk about a pathway to law school, and that's sort of what we're looking for in that personal statement. What brought you to law? What brought you to UVic Law? And then what added value are you bringing to the community and environment that we're trying to build? So when I talk about community, I am trying to recruit for that first year law class the broadest representation of Canadian families and society into that first year class. So that is I don't like to use the word diversity anymore because for me, one, it doesn't encompass the full representation that I'm trying to talk about or the intersectionality of the representation I'm trying to talk about. It covers Black, Indigenous, people of color, the LGBTQ. It covers people with disabilities, mental health issues, veterans, refugees, first generation, lower socioeconomic, the full breadth. When I see that first year class come walk through the doors, I want to be able to look and go, yeah, that's a full representation. And the reason that we're looking for that is because you are the future of the Canadian judiciary. You are the ones who are going to become members of that Canadian judiciary and are going to be able to make those changes. And the broader representation we have in that Canadian judiciary, the more faith people will have in the laws and the legal system. So that's just to give you an idea of what I'm looking for, what I'm looking at recruiting applicants into all of our programs and in every category. So what value are you bringing that's going, or what are you bringing that's going to bring added value to the table? So the personal statement, which, so I haven't talked about the LSAT or the GPA really purposefully here, because when I talk about admission to UVic Law, that's what people think about immediately is LSAT and GPA. That's where they go to immediately. And I'm not discounting the LSAT or the GPA, it is very important. But we're really interested in you as a person. So this is where your personal statement really comes into play. So your personal statement is two parts. Part A, you're answering those three questions. Why law? Why UVic Law? How are you a good fit for UVic Law? And how is UVic Law a good fit for you and your long-term career goals? And then what added value are you bringing to the table that's going to bring extra value to the community and the environment including the classrooms? So that's a big ask in 750 words in part A. So part B is where you're going to utilize that space using bullet points to tell us more about yourself. So your education, your education, work experience, any extracurriculars, perhaps you've traveled, perhaps I've seen people who have spoken about becoming a new parent and what they've learned from that and why it ties into why they want to pursue law or why they're a good fit for UVic Law. I've seen people who have summarized, they've traveled, spent a year traveling, hit 32 countries, and then again, just summarized underneath there what they've learned from that and what they're bringing to the table and why law. So don't dismiss your lived experience and what you have learned from that, your resilience, your determination. I say to people, when you're writing your application, remember three words: authenticity, because we want to know you; vulnerability, because it takes courage to share with a group of people you don't know a little bit about yourself and some insight into who you are. And then strategic is you want to tie it all together and make sure that you're letting the committee, myself and the committee, know everything that we need to know so that we can read your application and determine whether you are a fit for UVic Law and your ability to be successful in law school. So in the JD Indigenous category, you've got your LSAT and your GPA and your personal statement. You also have two references. One of those is a letter which talks about your connection to community. Now, your connection to community can be broadly defined in that we recognize that many Indigenous people do not have a direct connection to their own community. So if you do not have a connection, then talk about why you do not and how perhaps you're making a connection to that community. So community could be defined if you are working in a volunteer position and the majority of people and the population you're working with is primarily Indigenous. Or perhaps you're coaching a Little League team and the majority of the kids that you're teaching are Indigenous. Perhaps you are doing research. You're working with a prof and you're doing research and you're out in an Indigenous community working on research. That can also be a connection to community. Darcy, can you speak to that connection to community at all? What that might look like from your perspective?
Yeah, so that's great. That's really wonderful advice, Lori. And in two ways, like like if I can recall, my personal statement when it was a long time ago, in connection to the community, I really talked about my family, and I generally that's what I do is I talk about my family for that, and that was kind of the community because that's just the way we talk, like that's how we root it. And so I use that, and that a lot of what you said, Lori, about personal lived experience that came through, I think, in that, because I was able to really explain who I am, right? And that was kind of the way my family does things anyway. And then the second one was I really did rely on a lot of varied sources of connection to community. So not only was it I didn't grow up on Reserve, I grew up in Wetaskiwin, which is near there. So I showed my connection there. I was living in Edmonton, my connection to the sort of urban, multinational Indigenous community there, but also my work with various nations throughout Alberta, First Nations and Métis settlements as well. The work I did, but also just the connections I had as well. And so really was pulling in, it wasn't just thinking about where my family is rooted from and that sort of connection. I was really pulling on multiple threads that I don't know if it made a difference, but it worked. And that's just kind of how I wanted to explain it. And kind of what you said, Lori, was the key for me. I remember writing my letter was authenticity. Like I'm going to authentically show my connections and I think about this also where my connections are growing as well, right? I knew I had this work that I was doing with multiple nations in Alberta for 5 years, but I also knew there was places I wanted to grow as well. And I included that as kind of like, it's not, this stamp of approval from a community, but I'm also growing with my work in this sense or in that sense as well, I think was important. So it really tied into some of these things that you say are key, Lori.
Thank you. That's awesome. And I just can't express to you enough the importance of that authenticity piece. You have to remember that the admissions committee is made up of faculty. They're all lawyers. So, they've read a lot of these things and it comes through so strongly when somebody is writing from their heart compared to somebody who is writing in a way that they think the committee wants to read their application. So I just really strongly encourage, if you are writing your application, that you do it and it comes from here, not so much here. We are very much interested in this person, your grades, your LSAT, some of your other things will show us here. We actually want to hear from your part. So the connection, the other one that you are going to need for this category is a letter of reference. It has to be academic. I strongly encourage people when I'm talking about letters of reference, please do not just email somebody and say, hey, I'm applying to the JD program at UVic or the JD program at UVic. I need an academic reference going to be my reference. I can tell you personally, when I get a request to be a reference like that, it doesn't really inspire me to really want to write an amazing letter of reference. One, because they haven't given me any context. They haven't even taken the time to stop and have a conversation with me and ask, let me know a little bit more. So what I encourage you to do is reach out to your referee, have a virtual coffee or go meet them in person for coffee. Send them the link to the program and the category in which you're applying. Even if you're comfortable, share your personal statement with them and then go have a conversation and say, this is what I'm doing. I'm applying to law. This is why. It's a very competitive program. I need a really strong academic reference. Do you remember when I wrote this paper and you thought it really rocked? Could you speak to that in my reference? If they can provide us with examples. So if we get a letter of reference that says, I strongly recommend Emma Edmonds for the JD program. She was in my Sociology 400 class. She's a really great person. She attended all the time. I think she'd be a great addition to your program. Well, that's really nice, but it doesn't really tell us a whole heck of a lot about her academic ability or her ability to be successful in what is a very rigorous educational program. What makes a much stronger academic letter of reference is when they say, Emma Edmonds has asked me to be a reference. I strongly endorse her application to UVic Law. And here's why. Emma was in my Sociology 400 class. She was in attendance, every day. She showed really strong leadership skills. The students in the class really looked to her when they were doing, this project. She did an amazing research paper that actually we're taking forward to publish together. Not that you have to do that, but just as an example, she has really good critical thinking, and she has maintained she's within the top 5–10% of the students in this class. That type of thing really digs it down and provides the committee with some real insight into your academic ability. It also shows that this reference is committed and will stand behind you as far as your journey into law school. And that really is very powerful when the committee is looking at your overall application. Do you have any thoughts on that, Darcy?
Yeah, that's really wonderful advice. And one thing I would add is give your references time as well. So not only meeting, but also just give them time. Don't and so if you're like me and you feel like you're burdening people, and I sometimes I hit this point where I'm like, oh no, I'm not giving enough time. So that forces me to reach out. The more time, the better, because it may just be a product of having to get something done in a week that somebody is not able to really elucidate, to articulate why you're perfect for these programs because they don't have that time. So that's the first thing. And the second one is, is it helps. You're not coaching them, but it helps if you're showing them your statements, your resume, so they can even just recall things, right? Because professors, even if you're an outstanding student, they might just forget, oh yeah, they did this project, or even if it's part of your lived experience and you've shared that within class, they'll be able to recall that and make those connections that are important. In positions of hiring that I've been involved in, the reference letters similarly that are just authentic and that are really driving towards not only just they excelled at communicating, here is those kind of like stories that are included that really stand out. So however you can work a relationship and prep a reference for that is really important.
Perfect, thank you. So overall, and I'll whip back and just circle back to the GPA and how I calculate your GPA. So I will be calculating your GPA using years 1 to 4 of your undergraduate degree, or years 1 to 3 if you've completed 45 units or 90 credits. However many, whatever you've completed at the time of submission, that's what I will be using. It will be cumulative. And then again, depending on the number of units or credits that you have completed, I will discount some of your lower grades to give that GPA as much of a boost as I possibly can. And then your LSAT score, I will look at as well. And we will, the last LSAT that we will take is January 2022 for September 2022. Now, I strongly encourage you not to wait and write for your first time in January, because life inevitably happens. And if you get sick and you're unable to write in January, then you're out for a year. You've sabotaged yourself for a year, because we cannot accept LSATs after the January writing. Both of those are weighted at 50% each, which gives me what I call an index score. In this particular category, we are going to be looking at your really holistically reviewing your application. So each and every piece of your application is considered in detail. We're looking for your ability to be successful in law school, but we're also looking at you as a person. So again, that authenticity, that vulnerability, and that strategic are key. What I often say to people is think about, I'm a visual learner, so I hope this is helpful. I always say, think about it like building a garden path. Lay the foundation, which is the Y law, and then put the stones down, and then fill in between the stones with sand or smaller pebbles. And that's where you want to make sure that you're addressing any inconsistencies in your application or your transcript. And then when you feel that your application is as solid as it can be for this point in time, and you hit that submit button, that's an invitation to UVic Law and the admissions committee to walk beside you at the beginning of that path and walk along that path. And so, but by the time we get to the point that we've finished reading your application, we have a real understanding of that journey to law school and how you have arrived at submitting your application to law. So I don't know if Emma or Darcy, you have anything to add to that or any suggestions, and then maybe we can open it up for questions.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. That was such a wonderful image. That's great. I was like, I wish I had this advice when I was applying. Yeah, no, it's wonderful. The one thing advice I give with the LSAT, and I'm not sure if Eric or may have, if you've written it at all. Okay, yeah. So you know what you're in for, or you've already done it. Okay.
The other thing that I just really want to encourage, I know I talk to a lot of students, but I also, there's a real, I don't know, there's a real narrative, I just say out there, out in the universe, that law is not available to everybody. You know, that law school or an education in law. And I just want to say that UVic really is working on recognizing and acknowledging barriers that people experience to law school. And that's, again, one of the reasons that authenticity is really important, because we do recognize that there are barriers. And this category, as well as the discretionary category, were created as a result of trying to recognize those barriers that people like myself as a white settler woman never had to experience. So again, I invite you, how does Brené Brown say it, to dare greatly and you know, just be really authentic, vulnerable, and strategic with your writing your application. So I think what I'll do now is, I've talked a lot. We'll open it up. Does anybody have questions?
I have a question. So this one's for Darcy. You mentioned that you were thinking about like doing a master's before like going into law. I had like kind of the same, I guess, thought process. And if I don't get into UVic, I'm gonna try again in 2 years and complete a master's. But how did you like navigate kind of that process? And then how did you also navigate like your first year? You know, you're within the institution, you're learning common law, like as an Indigenous person, like, and law school is known to be like very competitive, and just how did you do it?
Yeah, thanks. Those are great questions. So the first one was, I really like, it was really a choice between law school or master's studies in some respect. And I really just loved engaging and learning. And I was going to be focused on Cree communities, whatever my master's ended up being. So what I did is I actually just met with people. So I spent time going to, for example, I met with the Dean of Native Studies, the Faculty of Native Studies at the University of Alberta at the time. And I met with Dr. Val Napoleon. And I was really, again, trying to get that feel of like, where is the best place for me and how am I going to excel, I guess, in some sort of way, but also where, you know, where am I going to feel the best? And so that's really how I made that kind of choice and navigated that. And I also knew I was just at a period in my life where, um, you know, a law degree just felt like it was, there was some sort of directness to it, if that makes sense. So that was my choice at that time. So that's how I kind of navigated those two things. Um, the second one is how did I navigate the first year? You know, it's interesting. The one was just that idea that law was a tool was really important, because when there is a bit of a culture in law schools about it is a rigorous degree, the first year especially, and there is, you know, there's law firms that are always mythically lurking about at the end, and that sort of competition is hard to avoid, that sort of ethos of it. And recognizing that this is just a tool, and a tool that was really good for me, having you know, time between my undergrad and law school, but also just my lived experience before my undergrad as well, really helped me, because I could just see, okay, I'm here. And if this doesn't work out, it's okay, was good for me, because it allowed me to really focus on, in my family, we talk about, you know, being balanced, not only intellectually, but physically, spiritually, and mentally. And so I knew, because everything was in that sort of intellectual sphere, that I'd really, those other three ways, I needed to spend a lot of time in those. And so I did. I was able just to be like, okay, this is a tool, and I need to be physically active. I need to be laughing. Is funny for my mental health. It's good. Those sorts of things are really important as well. And so that was a strong part. The other thing was really, I think about the cohort, the group of students in my first year. We really had quite a range of people who were older, who had been working, people who had gone straight through. So it was just such a great experience to meet other people and walk in different worlds. There was lots of Indigenous students who started with me as well. I think we had 10 in our year, or maybe it was 13. It was quite a bit, and so that was great as well, just to have this sort of cohort there. And so really, that competitiveness I found was not really there at UVic in my experience, because everybody is really helpful. Like, it was like, we're in this together. And so not quite, you know, I don't want to, I say this, and it might, because I work there now, to be like, oh, it was so great. Really, there was no competition whatsoever, aside from that sort of like internal stress of like, we need to find jobs at the end of this. And but like, everybody's really helpful. We had study groups for exams, um, you know, lots of great friends from the year as well. And so all those things really helped me, yeah, to get through. Yeah. And so I should say this too. I make it sound like it was like this, you know, this butterfly dream thing. The first year is really, it's strenuous, right? And it's any law degree program is really hard. And so I really needed to be really balanced in those ways to get through it. So I'm not saying I walked in there, I was like, oh, it's all great. It actually, you know, that first year is hard. It's a new way of learning. Your mind kind of gets formed. And this kind of goes back to your question as well. Coming from my family in an Indigenous nation, just the idea of law and seeing like, oh yeah, like there are things that are inside the law, and then there are peoples who have been considered in the margins or outside as well. And that actually really helped me in classes, because I could see, you know, that there's a lot of not arbitrariness, it's human made in a lot of ways. And so I could see how it could change and can be critical. And it was really helpful for me as well, my background. Yeah. So
Thank you so much.
yeah, yeah.
That's awesome, awesome, valuable information. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think I just wanted to add to what Darcy's saying, like that feeling of community, I think is really, it starts out in this admission process when Lori was talking about that we want to get to know you as an individual and actually get to know you. That's the start of it. We are like, it's a relatively small school, right? So it's a small community. We get to know each other. So we want to make sure that it's a good fit all around. And really the professors, you have people like Darcy there, you have other professors that really truly do care about the well-being of students and making sure that getting through that first year, which is always tough, like that you can actually do it. And there are supports on campus, specifically within the Faculty of Law for Indigenous students. There's the Indigenous Student Law Association, ELSA or ILSA. There is there's an Indigenous Student Center on campus as well. And there are elders and residents there that you're always welcome to make appointments with or stop in and chat and have tea. A campus cousins program where you can be matched up with other Indigenous students. So really a place to make community and build family if you're moving away from your family and community. So there are resources there.
Yeah, and I get asked, it's interesting that that competitive question comes up quite a bit when I'm out talking to potential applicants. And my response always is, there's the competitiveness in that you drive each other to be the best that you can be, right? It's not, they're going to knock you over and walk over you to get ahead of you. It's more, I know you, let's get the best. They encourage each other to be the best that they can possibly be. I work with students, and actually I have students who have come out of the woodwork. Unfortunately, couldn't recruit with me tonight or be here tonight because they were all unavailable, but I didn't even ask, and they all came forward and they're like, we want to come out and we want to talk about UVic Law with you. We want to, so I've got them pretty much on every other. Tonight just didn't work out, but if you do want to connect with a student to have a, an insight, email me and I'll put my email in the chat and I can make that happen. I can connect you with a student. So you can have a current law student either in the JD or the GID. And they'd be happy to talk to you about the program.
You're muted, Lori.
I talk so much, I'm just listening to myself now. You've got us here, so feel free. And I say to people, I have to think of another word, but for now, I'll just say this is a safe space. Nothing that you share here is, it's all of us. We're here to have and happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Eric, go ahead.
I have another question, and it's an okay follow-up to Mahev's question, and it's for Darcy. So with a lot of like the revitalization of Indigenous laws, it's clearly going to touch on a lot of different areas of life. And I know I said earlier that like a big emphasis at UVic could be like how it can connect to environmental law. But I wanted to ask Darcy, in his experience, what are the major sort of like, I guess you could say like hotspots for Indigenous law? Like where, like, are they engaging with treaty work or environmental, or I don't know, any other sort of business area? I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, it's a really great question. And I would say to be broad, like everywhere is a hotspot, but you're touching on it, right? There is, we can think about treaties definitely are kind of like an area, but when you think about Indigenous legal orders and revitalization, we're seeing it, the work that jumps out right away generally is either through child and family wellness. And there's a lot of work going on there right now in the criminal law sort of realm there. And then another one would be there's ways to look at it, but it's environmental laws, environmental regulation, resource relationships. And also I think this is, I can't know if you can hear my 2.5-year-old yelling upstairs as well. Yeah, that's what you're hearing there. And so, yeah, so the work that UVic in terms of like Indigenous law revitalization really works on with communities, right? And so that work is communities are approaching UVic. There's an Indigenous law research unit and looking for projects, and really those are the kind of the streams that they're really working on. There's a lot of child welfare work, and there's a lot of resource and environmental work as well. So it's definitely a strong stream, I would say. The scholarship there is it's burning. There's lots of work to do. That's a particular area that I am my research engages with, and also I know that we're trying to work to bring courses in there as well. So for example, there might be a summer intensive. I'm kind of like breaking news here. I might teach a summer intensive on Indigenous legal orders and environmental governance with another scholar as well. We're trying to work that out as well. So that's something we want to move forward, kind of bridging that.
Thank you. That answers my question. I actually have a second kind of like group of questions, if that's okay. This time for Lori. And it's just about the application process. You used one of the keywords vulnerable. Could you go a little bit more into detail and like give discussions? Because my understanding was it's kind of like, okay, say it says it's somewhere on your website, like, okay, if you have like a really bad academic turn, like maybe address it. Is that what you meant by being vulnerable?
No, not so much. When I talk about being vulnerable, it's more again asking you to share your story, share your path to law. So share your story. Well, again, and it goes back to that question of why law. Why is it important to you? Why not? I think as Darcy said, another discipline like social work or child and youth care or criminal justice, or there's so. For example, I get lots of people who, when I ask that why law question, they say, I want to advocate for people. Fabulous, fabulous. But again, why in law? Because again, advocacy occurs in a lot of different disciplines.
Yeah.
Why law specifically? So and the vulnerability piece is because I'm asking you to come from your heart, not so much from your head. I get a lot of personal statements that say UVic Law is really well known for its environmental law clinic. I'm really excited about environmental law. They quote off of the website, and I kind of go, don't do that. We know what's on the website. We wrote it. It's our marketing. What we don't know is you and why you're interested in law. So that's the vulnerability piece. It's asking you to dig it down to a deeper level than just basically answering, I want to advocate for people. Great, but then I would, again, so a little trick that I actually found really helpful. I was in a course a couple of weeks ago, and they asked us a question, why, blah, 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 and we answered. And then they were like, okay, so why is that important? So for example, I want to advocate for people. Great. Why? Because I've worked with women who have experienced domestic abuse, and I've seen the challenges that they and their children have had, and it's really important for me to advocate for that population. Third time, why? So if you ask yourself why 5 times, that your answer to that 5th why is probably what I want to see in that personal statement, and what the admissions committee is going to feel is a real, true, and authentic, and I'll say vulnerable, but to me, vulnerable is equivalent to courageous response to why law.
Thank you.
Does that answer it?
That does answer it. Yeah, that's pretty good. A few like kind of just like smaller, almost formatting questions I have. So the Indigenous statement, you do that in addition to the personal statement?
Yes. Are you talking about the reference?
No, no, like if I go on the website, it says
Yeah.
that they want a personal statement, but then there's also a quote unquote a statement describing your connection to your Indigenous
Yeah.
community. That's a separate document.
That is a separate document. And that's again where you can, that provides, there's no word count on that one.
Okay.
Now, having said that, that's not an invitation for you to submit an essay, but there's no word count on that because again, it's an opportunity for you to share with us your story.
Good.
As Darcy mentioned, he, you know, when he submitted for his application, he talked a lot about his family. You know, what do you need to talk about so that the committee understands that connection or lack of connection to community? And what are you doing to try to build a connection to community? And I can tell you in this category, that connection, that statement is a very important piece. They will be looking at that very carefully.
Good. Yeah, that's all I had. Thank you.
Okay.
Like, I have a question, another question. I'm like, I can't stop laughing. So earlier, Darcy, you mentioned summer intensive program. That's so exciting. In Indigenous legal orders, I'm wondering if like there are going to be any similar initiatives, like maybe a specialization in kind of like either Aboriginal law or Indigenous legal orders specifically for the JD program, like in the event that like, I don't know, just for like other students, like if they don't get into like the joint degree program, or if, I guess this is more tailored to like the JID program, but like have they considered maybe expanding their cohort from 25 to like maybe a little bit more? Like there's a lot there.
Yeah, those are great questions. I'll let we can let Lori talk about the expansion of the cohort. I'm not sure it's there's a lot of logistics obviously into like space and capacity, those things. But the first one, there is no plans on having a, as far as I know, and maybe I'm pleading a little bit of ignorance here, on having a direct stream in terms of like Aboriginal, you know, law, Aboriginal rights, Indigenous legal orders in the mix there for regular JD students in that program. But there is an easy ability to really tailor after your first year, right? So everybody does required courses the first, and then you have a few that linger on in the upper years. But then you can start to just make choices on, for example, the courses, if I can list them off the top of my head, are like Indigenous lands, rights and governance. There's like Indigenous legal theory. I know that was kind of cross-listed. A lot of professors who teach in the JID program will have upper year courses that are open to everybody as well. So for JD students, they can take those as well. So there's a way you can take a bulk of courses that will provide, you know, a stream. And then I'll also say this is that, again, when I was a student there, I appreciated the amount of sort of focusing that each class took towards Indigenous peoples, Indigenous rights, regard if it wasn't a course that was particularly focused there as well. And so, so no plans on that sort of stream, but there's lots of offerings. The summer intensive that I talked about generally occurs either once every, you know, 2 summers, or I think it's actually going to be quite a consecutive summers in a row now, where there's just specialized courses that are offered as well. And so there's a way that you can really fill after you do your required courses, kind of like make that stream as you will and get a lot of content. Yeah. So I don't know if you have anything on the sort of like technical side to add, Lori or Emma, to that.
I don't know. I mean, your timing is great to ask that question, because I actually have to meet with the with our interim dean to find out what our incoming numbers are, but generally for the JD, it's usually about 110, 113. For the JID right now, it's 25. And my understanding is, again, as Darcy mentioned, it's space, it's capacity. It's space availability. All our classes are held in the Fraser building. So all the staff, all the faculty, and all our classes are all within that building. Also, the JID program is a cohort-based program. So what that means is you're going to be going through year 1 and 2 with this group of students. Well, pretty much years 3 and 4, but I think in years 3 and 4, they can branch out a little bit more. But in years 1 and 2, you are going to be going together with this group of students. So we tried right from day 1, actually even before the students start, to really connect to and so that you can start to build that community. Build community within the JID program, but also within the JD and the JID across. It's an amazing opportunity. It's an incredible program. I often will say to students, I think it's also probably, I think, one of the harder programs I would think spiritually because of the content that you're going to be, what you're discussing in that classroom. And you'll be dealing with a variety of people in that class. So you have some people who are going to be well-grounded in their indigeneity. You're going to have other people who are new, fairly new to their indigeneity. You're going to have people who are not Indigenous to this land, but are Indigenous to others across the world. You're going to have people with different viewpoints. You're going to have people, you're going to have just a variety of people in that class. So it's going to be really important that you learn together how to engage in this difficult learning and support one another and know where your own supports are outside of the Faculty of Law as well. Because while it's incredible learning, it's also, it's the law, right? So we all come to school with our own journey, our own ups and downs, our own lived experiences. There is probably an absolute guarantee that at some point in time, you're going to be triggered by something somebody else says, by a legal issue you're studying. So I often really recommend to people that we have incredible supports within the Faculty of Law. We have incredible support at the University of Victoria, but I encourage applicants to both programs to really ensure that they have a really strong support structure outside of the Faculty of Law. So long story short, I think one of the many, many reasons they like to keep the JID cohort small is because of the way it's taught, but also it's trying to build relationship between the students that are in that cohort. Is that? Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you for that answer. It got me thinking of Indigenous demographics at UVic Law as a whole. And I was wondering what fraction or percentage of either the JID program or the JD program is Indigenous.
It's a great question. I don't have those for currently. I don't have the stats off the top of my head. I can tell you that for the JID, it is our goal. It's open to all applicants. It is our goal, however, to admit, let's say 51% Indigenous applicants and the rest non-Indigenous. So we do try to admit a slightly higher number of Indigenous into the JID. For the JD, I think I have 10 seats, but if I had more Indigenous applicants that that the committee wanted to admit to the program, we would make space. So they're the JID, usually I try to get, like I say, that higher level of Indigenous applicants. I had a high number of Indigenous applicants this year. We had 19 to the JD program, which was a significant increase over earlier years. But we only got actually one that accepted our offer. Out of the 19, we made 15 offers to the Indigenous applicants. We only received one, and basically, based on the information that I received back from those students, a lot of it was due to COVID. They wanted to stay close to their families. They didn't want to travel. So many wanted to stay. I mean, we did lose a few in UBC, which is our primary competitor, but a lot of them just did not want to travel.
Okay. Very good.
We are definitely, it is one of our strategic goals, is to try and increase the number of Indigenous applicants and the number of Indigenous students that are coming into our program, both the JID and the JD each year.
How many students would you say are applying to the programs who are Indigenous?
Well, we had, like I said, we had 19 to the JD last year. We had 74 applicants to the JID. Just give me a minute. This is rough, so don't quote me on this. I'm going to say of the 74, 25 were Indigenous.
Okay. And that's for the JD or?
That was the JID.
JID. And do they collect those statistics at all for the JD or?
Yes. Yeah, we do collect them. I just don't have them off the top of my head right now.
Okay, no problem. That answers my question.
Okay. Yeah, actually, okay, so I'm going to put something out here. I would be really interested in your thoughts. I mean, I talk to the current students as well. So part of my recruiting strategy is trying to reach out to Indigenous applicants. So again, if you have thoughts or ideas on how I can do that at, where you're in your communities or where you're at, I'd be more than happy to talk to you about that, because it is a bit of a challenge. I mean, I'm a white settler woman, so it's hard for me sometimes to reach out in other ways. This was one way that I thought I might be able to encourage some Indigenous applicants. So yeah, I'm totally open to it if you have ideas.
I currently work at the Indigenous Resource Center, and I get to manage the social media accounts and help the incoming and returning students. I think one thing that we've been getting more now is like emails from law schools about the resources or webinars like this that are available to Indigenous students specifically. I think that would be amazing, and I can also share it all over. Yeah,
that would be awesome.
Yeah, well, literally the entire staff and a lot of the Indigenous students at U Ottawa know about UVic because I talk about it a lot. And yeah, there's a lot of us that are interested in law specifically and revitalizing our Indigenous legal orders, from where we are on Treaty 9 or on Algonquin territory. So it's beautiful to see my closest friends, we're a group of 4 and 3 out of the 4 of us are wanting to go into law. So it's been so empowering and amazing to have that kind of community. And I just can't wait to be in a similar community where we're all like-minded.
Yeah, fabulous.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I please do share. This is being recorded, so it will go up on our webpage. So feel free to share it far and wide. We did do a social media campaign on the JID throughout this past year, which was great. So again, I can send you links to those things, or whatever you'd like, or whatever students would be interested in. I'd be more than happy to build a connection with the Student Resource Center there. Yeah. Okay, well, we've got about 10 more minutes. You've got Darcy here. Take advantage.
one more question. Did you attend like the native law program at USask before going to UVic? I've been seeing like oftentimes that's a requirement, like a conditional requirement for acceptance at some
Yes.
universities.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I didn't, and oh, I just saw something in the chatter. Oh, I didn't attend the native law, the program in property. That's what the focus was when I went there. You learn property, and because I was given the choice, and I was doing work in the summer, and so it just made more logistical sense for me to just go straight into law school. Without that, a lot of my classmates did, and they really loved meeting other lawyers there, other students prior there. So they actually walked into the classroom and they knew each other, and I had to form relationships there. But they had this strong bond, so it had this great effect there. They met students from across the country as well, so they had colleagues who were, at different universities, different law faculties as well. So I don't think that program has gone under a kind of a reformation the last few years, and so now it's a Indigenous law program, and I don't know what the status is in terms of whether we're going to be making requirements or that going forward. I know that's kind of stopped in the last couple of years, but what we've also replaced that with is a sort of set of virtual courses leading up to law school. I can't remember, I think it was in July this last year. Again, I wasn't at UVic yet. And if
Oh,
yeah, I saw everybody froze up, so I decided I'd stop talking then that time. Yeah, so it's just this, I think it was weekly, where they would meet for a couple hours in the evening on a schedule, just to learn about law school, learn a bit of the content as well, but also get that ability to learn, see your classmates, potential classmates, that thing. So trying to make up, provide that sort of social aspect and preparation for law school as well. Large benefit to it. Yeah, just personally, I just chose not to do it, just in terms of like, I quite honestly didn't have the money to spend to enroll and then take off from work I was doing. Yeah, that was kind of like my own personal consideration.
Thank you. I've heard a lot of like great things from it. I have a law mentor. Her name's Taryn, and she attended, I think in 2018. And I told her that I was really interested in attending UVic. And because of that program, like she was able to connect me with students at UVic that I'm still in contact with now. And that's like one of the huge advantages, especially when, there's not many of us. So yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, and so we're trying to replicate that. I know that we're thinking of creating some sort of community between not only UVic, but UBC and Thompson Rivers University as well, like Indigenous students who are entering there, just so it provides a little bit of that sort of networking outwards as well. Yeah.
Or even something that would be, I think, meaningful for undergraduates as well, would be like a mentorship program or mentorship circle of some sort, where you have like the Indigenous Law Students Association to have like, I don't know, panels or something for the students that are maybe interested in, going into law. I'm not sure if that's something like UVic has. I know I'm trying to like organize something for U Ottawa. It's just everyone's so busy right now with COVID. But I think personally for myself, like it would have been really useful to have like a resource like that available. So I am a first generation university student, and I would be a first generation law student as well. So I've had to like build my own community, like you guys have been saying. So
Yeah, so that's a really great recommendation, Mav. And we can pass it along. So I can pass it along to Ilsa. I think we're just learning as well in the virtual world because of COVID, that what is actually possible in those. So those things hadn't happened in the past because I think we're all afraid of doing this, but now we know how to do it, right? And so that's a really wonderful suggestion that I can talk with some of the students here. Yeah.
Awesome.
And I can follow that up and say that again, I've had students who were on the admissions committee with me last year who have come forward asking to work with me for that exact purpose. They want to connect with students who are being admitted to law school, Indigenous students with currently enrolled Indigenous students, Black students with currently enrolled Black students, etc. Right? But like Darcy said, and like you've mentioned, it takes a little bit of time to make that happen, and that came at the end of the summer, and I haven't had a chance. But there is a real desire, and it is being driven really a lot by currently enrolled students. So again, like I say, if you, we don't have that a formalized program, but if you are interested, I can absolutely make that connection and make that happen for you.
That's great. Awesome. It's nice to know that we have like the supports everywhere. It's comforting. Admit, like it's been so stressful like the past few months with applications, the LSAT, and just knowing that we have the supports. It's like reaffirming, you know, why I decided to apply to UVic. So thank you.
And another thing I just want to share, I know we're quickly running out of time here, but another thing I just want to share, all applications are treated with the utmost respect and confidentiality. I just give an extra caveat to students applying in this program to the JID as well as the JID, that your stories are honored, your stories are, and your applications are read with the utmost compassion and empathy and heart, and we hold them close and we hold them safe. So I just like to let people know that because many people, some of these stories are hard to share. When you're building that pathway, sometimes it can be, you know, opening some hard stories, some hard experiences. So I like to just let people know that every member of the admissions committee holds that close and treats it with the utmost respect, confidentiality, and consideration. So we have 3 minutes left. If anybody has a question, send it out now. And if you happen to go away and think of a question, don't hesitate to contact myself or Emma. If we don't have the answer, we can definitely find it for you or connect you with the appropriate person to answer that question.
Yeah, and likewise, if you think there's a question you want to direct at me, you can Google my name and UVic, and my email will probably show up there, and you can by all means send an email or pick up the phone and call, which some people still do these days as well.
Okay, well, I'll stop.
I was just going to say thank you. Yeah, sorry. All of you, it's been super good.
Oh, sorry. I just thought of a question. I don't know if we'll have time. I'm just wondering, like, specifically about just the application process, like how, or like what steps the admission, or like what order specifically, if you can disclose that, that you all like go through the application. Because I'm just waiting right now for one like letter to be sent in, but I do have like everything else submitted, and I've been like anxiously checking, you know, refreshing to see if it would update. So I don't know if you guys can disclose that, but
What I can tell you, so we have two programs that went within the JD program, we have 3 categories that people are submitting applications, and then within the JID 2 categories. So we have when you submit your application, Emma it won't come to me until your application is complete for evaluation. So your LSAT, your unofficial transcripts, your letters of reference, your personal statement, your JID statement, for example, or until everything that's required for your application has been submitted. But please know that once you get all of that submitted, it then takes us, like once you hit the submit button, then Emma and Maddie, who also works for us, they go into high gear. And now it takes time. They have to start processing because we're working with multiple systems. So if it doesn't show within a week, don't panic. It's probably in there. We just understand that once you hit, it doesn't all just come together. They actually have to pull it together. So it takes a little bit of time, but do please keep an eye on that checklist and make sure that your documents are coming in, especially your references. If there's a problem, email me, but give it a couple of weeks to make sure. And then once that happens, then it'll land on my desk, and then I go through and I will start the evaluation process. So I read every application that comes through. And just to give you an idea, I have to separate them. So I'll do the JD regular, and then a couple of days I might do JD Indigenous, and then the other couple of days I have to do the JD JID, because I have to keep them separate. As well as I like to do that as well, because when I read the applications, you guys have put a lot of time and effort into creating these applications. I want to honor that by reading your application thoroughly and holistically, and ensuring that it gets to the committees for review in a timely manner. Now, we do a rolling admissions, so we will start making offers hopefully by mid-November. Those will roll through most likely until April or May of next year. If your file is in a holding pattern, so if you look and you see that it's gone to officer for review, and it's been sitting there for 2 months, that doesn't mean I haven't looked at it. It could mean that I'm waiting for another LSAT score. I'm waiting to see if another LSAT, or there could be your September to December grades. I'm waiting for your September to December grades to see if that brings you, it means that probably I'm waiting for something. It could also be that the committee has reviewed it and they want to hold it. So for the JID files, we will start to look at them, but probably no decisions will be made until we start to get a better idea of the applicant pool that we have. So it can be really stressful, and I do acknowledge that, but if your file is in a holding pattern, that's not a bad thing. Just check your checklist, make sure everything is in, and then know that we will be in touch with you as soon as we can.
And also may have, when it comes to the references, if you're looking at your checklist and it's not updated yet for the references and you're starting to worry, because I know that's outside of your control, they're submitting it to me. You can always send me an email too and say, has so-and-so submitted the reference yet, if you're really worried about it. I'll put my email in the chat as well.
That's awesome. Thank you.
I think that's it. It's late in the evening. Everybody's probably got to go have dinner. So thank you very much, Darcy. Thank you so much for being here. It's been such an honor and a pleasure to have you here, and Mayhav and Eric too. This has been wonderful. I never know what these are going to turn out like, and this is just so nice just to have a small group to be able to really get to know each other a little bit. So I really look forward to receiving your applications and taking them forward to committee for consideration. So have a fabulous night, everybody. And any questions, let us know.
Take care, everybody. Nice to meet you in this space. And yeah, we'll talk later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.